Well, welcome everyone. I know that we have many more people who have registered than who are currently on, but I want to get started so that we can start promptly. And I know that Marie Ellis, one of our guest speakers, has limited time with us this morning. So I will just start kicking things off. So first of all, thank you so much for spending some of your morning with us and talking with us about candidate engagement this morning. Elections offer an excellent opportunity for nonprofits and their partners to educate candidates about issues important to their mission and communities, because candidates seem most accessible and open to hearing new ideas during the election cycle as compared to when they're sometimes elected into office. And there's a number of strategies to begin building relationships with future elected officials, share policy ideas, and influence policy debates. And we're going to go into depth on two of those strategies and touch upon many of the others. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Marie Ellis, who's the Public Policy Director at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, to talk about engaging candidates as 501c3s.
Hey everyone, good morning. And much thanks to Libby for letting me go first because I do have to hop off, unfortunately, by 10:30. So thank you for that. As Libby said, I'm the Public Policy Director at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. And so if you don't already know, we are a statewide association of nonprofit organizations. We've got over 2,000 member organizations across the state. Public policy is one of our main focus areas. We also do a lot of trainings for nonprofits on things like fundraising and supervising and bringing nonprofits together to share ideas as well. So I'm here today, as Louise said, to talk about 501c3 nonprofits and elections and give an overview of what we can and can't do and sort of the why behind that. We actually just did an hour-long session on this yesterday, so I'm going to try to take the 10-minute most important nuggets of the hour and give those to you. So grab a sip of your beverage while I figure out how to share my screen. Hang on a second. All right, Libby, can you confirm that you can see this this slide?
Yes, it is.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And now yes, I'm trying to move it to the other screen so you can all tell I'm talking to you, but I don't know how to do that. So I'm going to be looking at both screens. It'll be fine. We'll all get through this together. I don't think it's always really obvious to people why nonprofits should be involved in elections work, in getting out the vote and talking to candidates and things like that. So let's talk about that for a minute. Nonprofits tend to have really deep reach into communities. And by that, I mean nonprofits work with people as individuals, right? So you've got other groups like political parties that are trying to reach voters and get out the vote. And they're really trying to do more of a blanket approach, get to everyone, as many people as you can. But nonprofits can do a much more focused approach on getting to the folks that they actually work with. And because they work with those folks, they're trusted as well. We need to remain nonpartisan. If you're a 501c3, we put most on the slide because, of course, 501c4s and C5s have some different rules. If you want to get into the tax code, it's all very exciting. But partly because we have to be nonprofits, because we have to be nonpartisan, we are more of a trusted source as well. Let me see. Okay. Because I'm going through multiple slides, I have to look at my notes to remember which ones I want to do. All right, 101. This is kind of the big, broad overview of nonprofits and elections. And when I say nonprofits, I am talking about the 501c3 charitable nonprofit organizations. We must remain nonpartisan. You'll probably hear me say that 100 times. Nonpartisan does not mean neutral, however. That's definitely something that MHP knows. They do lots of issue advocacy. And so, definitely follow their lead on that sort of thing. But we do have to make sure that we're not supporting or opposing specific candidates or specific parties. We can do voter registration. You can do voter registration until you are blue in the face. You can educate voters, do lots of get out the vote door knocking and things like that. We can also work on ballot measures, which is interesting, but not particularly relevant this year. A little more specifically, if it's a nonprofit that does issue advocacy, they can absolutely continue to do that through election season. And part of the reason why that's important is as we get closer to the election, that's when working with people who are now also candidates gets a little more important. It's a little more important to pay attention to dates, right? In some ways, all elected officials are candidates unless they've announced their retirement, particularly those that have 2-year terms. And so there's sort of a window, a large window where it's like they're more in their capacity as, you know, sitting in their office. But then as we get closer to the election, it's like now they're more of a candidate. And so working with them or even sometimes thanking them for doing certain things could appear to be partisan. And that's really what it's all about, is how does it appear? I often ask myself, would a reasonable person think that the nonprofit is endorsing this candidate when they take this action? Because it is so much about the facts and circumstances of specific instances. So if someone were to say, ask, can we invite a sitting legislator who's also running for re-election to speak at our event? I don't know, because I don't have enough of the background information that I need. I need to know, have you worked with that person before, right? Do you work with other elected officials in your area? Is this something that you would have done in a non-election year? Lots of questions. So facts and circumstances are a really big part of determining what is okay and what isn't. Obviously, you can educate candidates. That's part of what a questionnaire is for. And I know MHP does this great questionnaire, and I think you're diving deeper into that and what other organizations can do as well. But sometimes just asking the question and forcing someone to put an answer on paper, I shouldn't say forcing, suggesting that they put it on paper, can make people think about things in a way they haven't before, and they sort of educate themselves as they're doing that. So it's a really great tool. Candidate forums, I think y'all will be talking more about that as well. It's a great thing for nonprofits to do. Voter registration drives. If you work with people, clients, board members, volunteers, whatever, be asking them all, are you registered to vote? People can check on the Secretary of State's website, mnvotes.org, if they're already registered, which is really handy. All right, what can we not do? Don't endorse candidates. I think that's fairly obvious to most, but if it's not, don't do it. Don't make any campaign contributions from a 501c3, never. However, individual staff people can certainly make campaign contributions if they want to support a specific candidate. We also can't ask candidates to sign pledges. That's one that I think is interesting. That isn't, I wouldn't assume is the case. So a good one to note that we can't do that. And we can't communicate anything that explicitly or implicitly favors or opposes a candidate. And that's the piece where I'm talking about facts and circumstances really matter. Are you implicitly endorsing someone, or would a reasonable person think so? So just a really quick overview of what's happening. There are so many seats up for election this year. I think kind of the conventional thinking is, if it's not a presidential election year, it's not as important. Like, those are bigger election years. Well, in a way they are. There's tend to be more advertisement, and the political parties are more involved in really getting the word out about the election. But look at all these seats. Like, our entire legislative branch is up for election this year, and our entire executive branch is up for election this year. That's huge. And I think a lot of you who work in advocacy, anyone who works in advocacy knows this, and a lot of other folks do too, that the balance of power between the DFL and the Republicans is very close in Minnesota. And so those 201 seats, they really do make a big difference in terms of who's going to be leading the House and Senate and who's going to be sitting in the governor's seat, obviously. I put a quick timeline here, largely to point out that the election really starts on September 23rd. So, if you've got an event September 30th and you think, we're still more than a month out from the election, I think this is, safe to do in a nonpartisan way, the election has started. So keep that in mind. And if you're doing any voter registration work, the deadline to pre-register is October 18th. But of course, in Minnesota, we have same-day voter registration. So good for us, go Minnesota. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is just the first two pieces slide. The census was done in 2020. And so, of course, the congressional districts were redrawn, as well as precincts and wards. And so it is quite possible that a person is in a different voting area than they were before, that they're going to be voting in a different numbered district than before and have a whole new slate of candidates and things like that. It actually happened to me when I moved into this house that I'm in right now 10 years ago, and it was so confusing. And I was so frustrated. I'm like, I work in election, like I know this stuff. I worked at the Secretary of State's office. I should be able to figure out who I'm supposed to be voting for. It's confusing. And a lot of folks also will have a new polling place if that's been, if they've been redistricted into a new district, new polling place. That can be confusing for folks. So helping people know ahead of time that they have a new polling place is critical. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you all. Oh, there we go. I think that worked. And the last thing I will mention, and then I think we have a few minutes if people have questions, is that on MCN's website, we have some various tools. I'll put that in the chat for that website. But I would recommend checking back on that website in a few weeks, because we are currently working on a nonprofit elections guide. So it will have, all the information I just shared, but in much more detail. And we'll be publishing that in English, Hmong, Somali, and Spanish. So that'll be coming in the next weeks. I don't know exact date, but weeks, not months. And we're pretty excited about that. So, so keep an eye on that. That's all the stuff I wanted to make sure to say. And I think, Libby, we've got time for a few questions if people have them.
We do. So if you do have a question, you can either pop it in the chat or raise your hand, and we can unmute you. So if, again, feel free to put your hand up. I'm looking and I don't see any, but Marie, I have a few questions. So you talked about sometimes context matters. So that can be, and it can be confusing to know when your work appears partisan versus nonpartisan. Are you in the election cycle, all these things. So rather than doing nothing and just backing off because you're confused and you don't want to get in trouble, who do we go to ask questions? Provide that context. Do we go to you? Who do we go to find answers to know what we're doing is okay?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can definitely come to me, and I won't give you specific advice on yes, it's okay, or no, it's not, because there's no way for me to know exactly. But I can help you look through the different factors to think through to decide if it looks partisan or not. I learned in law school, what did they call it? I think the mom test. So my professor said, think of someone who's very smart, but doesn't work in this area at all, right? And explain this law to them. But in this case, I'd say, find someone who's really smart, not at a nonprofit, doesn't work in elections, and say, we're going to do this. Would you think that the nonprofit is endorsing this candidate, is telling people that they should vote for this candidate? Like, do you get that vibe from this? And that can be a really good, just kind of, if they say yes, don't do it. What else did I want to say on that? I'm hoping to, I've been thinking about this for a few weeks, hoping to develop kind of a checklist of things to consider when wondering if it will look nonpartisan or not. So this is an impetus that maybe I should do that. So thank you.
I think that would be helpful. So Brad has a question. Let's see. Is there a cost to join Minnesota Council of Nonprofits?
There is. It starts at $50 a year, which I believe is what most nonprofits pay, and it's based on size of the organization. But definitely check out the website, because members are how we do our work.
But your resources, the resources that you have highlighted and talked about, those are available to the general public, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the guide that we're working on right now will be posted on our website in all 4 languages, members, non-members. We want everyone to have access to that. And Libby, I just want to add something I thought of with your last question as well. One thing I hear fairly often from nonprofits is they say, well, we have a lawyer on our board, and they say that it's too risky to do any kind of advocacy or policy work. And this is like, it gets under my skin so much. I hate it so much. So if you do have anyone on your board, lawyer or otherwise, who's saying like, oh, you really shouldn't do this, like this just looks too risky, it's not worth it, some folks will say it's not worth the cost, right? Or it's not worth the risk. I think there's extreme risk in not doing this work, but also feel free to have that person connect with me, because sometimes I think just being able to take a look at what the law actually says and knowing that other nonprofits do this all the time can put somebody more at ease.
Can you just expand on what you said about the cost of not doing this work?
I can try to. I feel like it's not so eloquent in how I want to say it yet, but I've been thinking about doing a session at an upcoming conference on looking at some of the great advocacy work that nonprofits have done and voter turnout work, and then asking people to imagine what would have happened if those nonprofits had done nothing, right? Like that good work doesn't happen, right? There are a lot of people who will vote because they got multiple texts from a nonprofit that they work with. And if the nonprofit hadn't done that work, they wouldn't vote, right? And entire communities wouldn't have voices heard. And so there just really is such a cost to inaction on this kind of work.
Thanks for that. Dana in the chat asks, when will the Secretary of State's website be updated to reflect the results of the primary?
I don't know. I would guess it's fairly soon though. You can always call them to ask. They've got like an elections hotline. I called before. I had to wait on hold for like 10 minutes, which was kind of annoying, but they always have the answers you need. And the Secretary of State's website is fantastic. So absolutely check that out.
One thing that our partners at Habitat noticed that we had put on our website was the Who Represents Me tool that everyone kind of promotes as an easy way to engage. So when will that be updated to reflect the new districts?
You know, I think that doesn't get updated until January 1. I could be wrong, but I think because the person who represents you is there until the end of the year. And that's one problem with, I shouldn't say problem, but something to be aware of with redistricting. And that's what had tripped me up when I moved. When I look up, who represents me, okay, it's this city council member, cool. I look up all the candidates who I'm going to vote for, and then I go vote, and that's actually not who I'm voting for. And it was pretty confusing. So that tool is great to know who represents you now. But I think anytime we use that, we have to be clear with people, like this may actually be different in the upcoming election. And so get that sample ballot from the Secretary of State's office so you know who you're actually voting for.
Thanks for that. Ben from Beacon is asking for you to talk a little bit more about timing when you're saying to stop nonpartisan work after voting starts.
Great question. No, I'm definitely not saying that. Nonpartisan work can always be done. Yes. So thank you for clarifying. What I mean by that is it's easier for something to look partisan after voting has started, right? Doing something in January of an election year is very different than doing it in September of an election year because the person is more in their candidate role. And that's just even heightened after voting starts. That's all I meant by that. So great clarification.
Are there any other questions for Marie? I'm not seeing any. Cool. So thank you so much, Marie, for joining us. If you do have questions, Marie is accessible, as is her staff, and the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits website is an excellent resource. And when we send out the slides from this webinar, we'll send out their website information and the link that Marie shared in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Libby. I'll hang around for a few more minutes before I have to drop off, but it's been great to see you all, or your names at least.
So it sounds like if you still have a question, Marie may be able to answer it in the chat. So feel free to use the chat to engage with her for the next 5-10 minutes, maybe. All right, Brian, if you could pull the slide deck back up, that'd be great. Thank you. This is where we are. Okay. I'm going to now talk about the work that MHP is doing to engage candidates through our candidate questionnaire. But first, just why candidate engagement is important. So elections are a fantastic opportunity to get decision makers thinking about housing issues. Too often, the issues around affordable housing and affordable homes are ignored throughout the campaign cycle and leading up to the election. And when that happens, it's harder to get the now electeds, post November 8th, electeds to start prioritizing housing. If they weren't prioritizing housing as a candidate, it's all the more challenging to get that work and to get housing as a top issue for not just the candidate, but for their caucus. And so raising housing on the political agenda only happens when candidates for elected office understand that the issues of affordable housing are important to voters and important to the organizations working in their district and important to the constituents in their district. And so it's just critically important that advocates and constituents, general community members, educate and engage candidates throughout the election cycle. And candidate engagement can take many forms, including candidate forums, and Ben Helvig-Anderson from Beacon will talk about their work around candidate forums. It can take the form of a town hall meeting, candidate surveys, candidate fact sheets, inviting candidates to possibly join you at a community meeting or for a tour, to engage with residents, things like that. So, but I want to emphasize that the importance of this work is really to raise housing as a priority issue by talking regularly about housing with candidates, and to educate people who are future decision makers once elected. And elected leaders always start as candidates before they become policymakers. So whether or not they're an incumbent or they're a challenger to an incumbent, engaging candidates is a great way to just increase the visibility of housing and the work that you're doing in their district, the work that you're doing with their constituents and the needs of their constituents is just really important. Brian, you can go to the next slide. So this year with Habitat for Humanity Minnesota, MHP has put out a candidate questionnaire. This is our third questionnaire. So the candidate questionnaire, we're asking candidates to fill out a questionnaire of 8 questions, and it's really a way for candidates to learn more about our organization, your organization, as you help us to promote the candidate questionnaire. It's a way for candidates to learn more about critical issues around affordable housing based on the questions. We provide resources, we frame the questions with data points that we've collected and gotten inputs from our partners on. And then it's a way for us to learn more about the candidates as they respond to the candidate questionnaire. And there's a lot of ways in which we can then use those responses to inform other engagements that we do with them as candidates and as electeds. And I put a sample question up there. The candidate questionnaire uses open-ended questions to solicit the candidate's opinions on a range of issues. So we're not trying to get yes or no answers from candidates. For example, we don't want them to say, no, I don't support, or do you support universal housing vouchers? No, right? We want them to answer and provide us what are their policy solutions to addressing housing instability, get them, as Marie said in her presentation, get them thinking about housing in a way that maybe they haven't thought about before, and putting that in writing, and also helping understand where there may not be alignment, what are their policy solutions? What are their ideas coming to the table? Brian, go to the next slide. So the 2022 candidate questionnaire is, again, a questionnaire with 8 questions. We are asking candidates to answer questions about: what do you believe is the role of government in ensuring everyone has a place to call home? What will you do to end homelessness? What will you do to prevent evictions? What meaningful steps will you take to eliminate racial disparities in housing? What will you do to support the housing needs of those at the lowest income level in Minnesota? What strategies do you support to improve housing conditions and reduce utility costs? What steps will you take to increase opportunities for renters to purchase homes, condos, or cooperative ownership models? And how will you include those most impacted by housing needs in developing and implementing housing solutions? So those are the 8 questions that we have sent to candidates. We sent them out to all 210 House candidates and 66 Senate candidates. These went out on Tuesday of this week. We've already gotten a handful of responses on Tuesday, and then we got some on Wednesday, I believe. And we are asking candidates to respond by October 21st, though we will take responses after that time. We're putting in a lot of effort and a big push in these first few weeks to get candidates to respond, knowing that as the campaign season progresses, they get more and more busy, and getting them to respond early, we think will be most successful. And we're really hoping that you all will help promote the candidate questionnaire and use the candidate questionnaire as a tool for you to help to engage with candidates in your district and in the districts where you're doing work. So just some quick logistics. The candidate questionnaire is on our website. We have a page dedicated to the 2022 candidate questionnaire. There you can find the actual questionnaire. So the questions that we've asked and the framing that we've used to ask those questions. You can find the resources that we've provided to candidates, and that can be important as you're doing direct follow-up and engagement and asking candidates to respond. You can look and see what additional resources you might like to send to candidates based on what we've already sent them. You can also find the responses on the website. Brian, my colleague, who you'll hear from in a second, does a fantastic job of getting that updated as quickly as possible. So if you're looking for responses, you can check that, refresh that a few times each week. You can also email me to get on a listserv, and I'll be sending out weekly emails to partners who are interested in getting updates on who's responded and some other and kind of where we're targeting our efforts in a given week to get more responses. And the promo toolkit that Brian will talk about is also on our website page. So why is MHP, why is Habitat doing this? Why are our partners helping promote this work, and why we think you should join us in helping promote this work? So the candidate questionnaire, not only is it a useful tool to educate candidates on issues around affordable housing and to raise the profile of housing during the election cycle, but the responses can be used to help educate voters. And so registering and turning out voters has the strongest impact, especially when those voters show up to the polls and they know where the candidates stand on issues that are important to them. And so when we have responses through the candidate questionnaire, we can use the words of candidates to inform voters on where candidates' values are around affordable housing. So it's a powerful tool in that regard. It raises the profile of the issue. So in the 2020 election cycle, there was a lot of engagement, not just the candidate questionnaire. A lot of partners were doing a variety of candidate engagement work. And that was the year where we saw the biggest investment in housing. So all of these efforts aligned with a 100 million housing infrastructure bond investment, the largest bonding bill ever. And so I believe all of that work, engaging candidates, going into the election, knowing that their constituents wanted them to deliver on not just a bonding bill, but housing in that bonding bill. All of that work influenced what we saw in that bonding bill. And then we believe that it can help inform follow-up. If you get responses from all of the candidates in a district, you can put together a voter guide, like the one on the right, with Clinton and Trump as an example. You can ask questions from the candidate questionnaire in a town hall or forum if the candidates haven't responded to the questionnaire, or you can use the responses from the questionnaire as follow-up to have a candidate go into more detail when you're engaging with them at a forum or a town hall meeting. You can use those responses to figure out how you might further educate a candidate and then an elected official, where you see them having, let's say they answer the question about evictions with a one-sentence answer. You can use that to inform you that, okay, we need to sit down further with this candidate or this elected and get them more information about what's happening around evictions, especially in their district. And it can be used for direct lobbying, but I won't go into detail on that. Brian, you go to the next. Brian will go into more detail about promoting the questionnaire through the promo toolkit, but we are really hoping that partners will work with us to get the word out about the candidate questionnaire. Ask candidates in districts where they're doing work, where you live, to respond to the candidate questionnaire. In 2020, we had 70 responses. This year, we're aiming to get that up to 90 responses, and we're really aiming to have a better balance of Republican and DFL members respond to the questionnaire. It was pretty heavy TFL responses versus Republican. And also we're striving for greater geographic diversity, but we can only do that with a heavy lift from partners who are engaging the candidates. So it might take 10 requests for a candidate to say, okay, my people in my district, people doing work in my district care about housing. I'm gonna fill out this questionnaire. That's what it can take, because housing may not be on their radar right now. They're not hearing about it, but if they hear about it for the 10th time, it might be that 10th time that gets them to take action and respond to the candidate questionnaire. So we're really hoping that you'll work with us to promote the questionnaire. As you ask candidates to respond, make it your own. So we put out this resource, but feel free to use that as an opportunity to educate candidates on the work that you and your agency are doing, the issues that you see as most critical in your communities. And then another way to engage is publicly thanking, especially on social media. So social media, candidates love social media as a way to promote themselves. And we found that engaging candidates with social media and thanking them, not only do they get excited to be able to promote that they filled out the candidate questionnaire and they're being thanked by multiple organizations and members in their community, but it also is a stimulus for other candidates to then fill out the candidate questionnaire. And then also I encourage you to read responses and follow up with candidates in your district. And then don't forget that once they're elected, that resource is still on our website so that you can use their responses as you engage with elected officials and when they're in a position to make policy decisions. Next slide.
And I will go ahead and jump in here. Like Libby said, my name is Brian Muse. I am her colleague here at MHP. I'm just going to share a little bit briefly about our promo and social media toolkit. Like Libby was saying, so we know social media is one of the best ways that we can connect with candidates and engage with them around the election activities. So this is a tool we built 2 years ago, and we thought it was very successful. It is a tool that is designed to help support you, other advocates in engaging your networks, and oftentimes directly engaging with candidates themselves. So the idea of the toolkit is that it's pre-drafted content that you can copy and paste into different forums, different vehicles to kind of help promote the questionnaire, help engage those candidates. So Libby did give kind of a rundown of our candidate questionnaire webpage, but I just want to point out where you could find this toolkit. This toolkit's going to be at the bottom of the webpage in this For Housing Advocates tab. I also anticipate this is the place where a lot of our additional election resources are going to live, not just our MHP resources, but as we gather partner resources, we will share them there. I'm sure that's where one of the places the recording of this webinar will live. So you will be able to find that there. So in terms of the promo kit itself, what's in it? What does it look like? So inside the toolkit, one of the first things you'll find is a list of hashtags that we're using. Hashtags are a great way to build consistency in our message, build momentum around our messaging. So we are encouraging folks to use them. The hashtag we have picked specific to the questionnaire is Vote Homes 2022. Using hashtags is also a great way for us to just kind of track the discourse, see what people are saying around the questionnaire, and see what's driving engagement. Another hashtag we're encouraging folks to use is MNLedge. A lot of you might know this is kind of the #1 hashtag used by folks in and around the Minnesota legislature. So that's a great way to kind of get our message out there into kind of already into these circles where folks might be already engaging with candidates or interested in what's going on at the legislature. In addition to the hashtags, we also have created these kind of shortened bit.ly links. These are just shorter URLs for some key links that we're hoping make them more shareable. The one on the screen there will take you directly to MHP's candidate webpage or candidate questionnaire webpage. So that's where we will be sharing the questionnaire, information about the questionnaire, the responses, and the kind of before mentioned resources. Also in the promo kit, there's going to be a link that you can share directly with candidates that will allow them to access the form where they can answer the questions and make their submissions that way. So then finally in the toolkit, we're going to find that cut and paste content I was talking about. So there is some pre-drafted text with kind of all the links already built in that you can just copy and paste right into your own existing newsletter. And so it's ready to send out. We're hoping this is a tool that kind of makes it so it's very little work on your end to kind of share out that information. Similar to the email, there is some text for a blog. You want to share the blog on your website. Sometimes having it on the website is nice to share it on social media and kind of have a landing page to direct folks to. And then kind of thirdly, I think this might be the majority, it might ultimately be the majority of the promo kit, but there are sample social media posts. So in there, you will find both info text for a Facebook post, as well as some sample tweets. They're just a little different based on kind of the nature of those platforms. But the tweets are broken down into 3 categories. There are tweets to tweet directly at your candidates, tweets kind of encouraging them to fill out the questionnaire, encouraging them to share their opinion on housing issues. There are tweets that are kind of promoting the questionnaire more generally to fellow stakeholders, to advocates, to kind of raise kind of general promotion, raise awareness, and kind of drive that engagement piece. And then the third category of tweets are tweets thanking candidates once they have filled out the questionnaire. Like Libby was saying, this is a really important and good way to engage candidates. And we do want to thank them, kind of give them some public recognition if they do fill out the questionnaire. And hopefully that also encourages other candidates to fill out the questionnaire as well. So again, this is designed to kind of make sharing this information as easy as possible. And again, this is available on the questionnaire webpage, but we will also send it out kind of in a follow-up email after the webinar as well. So I will turn it back to Libby.
Thanks, Brian. And I just wanted to end with, so we're talking about the candidate questionnaire because that's where we're investing a lot of our time and energy in this particular moment. And then Ben is going to be talking about the forums that they're working on. But I just wanted to touch on other ways in which you can engage candidates. And there'll be a link at the end of this slideshow with the link to external resources where you can find out more information about how to host a tour, hosting a town hall style meeting, attending meetings, town halls, and forums to ask questions and to talk to candidates, and producing and sharing voter guides, writing LTEs, and the use of social media are all great ways to engage candidates throughout this session. And again, this should go in tandem with some voter engagement strategies that are also happening, but today we wanted to focus on that candidate engagement So next I will pass it over to Ben Helvig Anderson, who is the Vice President of Policy and Organizing at Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative. Good morning, Ben. And I think, Ben, you're going to be sharing your screen, correct?
Yep. Yeah, I have a PowerPoint I'll share here in just a second. So good to be with you all. Yep, as Libby said in my intro, my name is Ben Helvig Anderson. I'm the Vice President of Policy and Organizing at Beacon, and I will work on sharing my screen here. Great. And so I'm going to just talk about our work around the election season, our strategy and tactics in 2022, but a little before as well, and kind of what we've done. And so just some background for everyone. I think I know a lot of you, but for those I don't and who are not familiar with Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative, we're a collaborative of congregation that creates homes, shelters families, and organizes to change policies so that all people may have a home. So we're kind of a pulling together of a lot of different work. We have a whole housing development arm that really focuses on building 30 AMI housing and below supportive housing for folks who've experienced homelessness or a lot of different walks of life. We have a family shelter that exists in now Scott and Carver County that works out of congregations. And then we have a lot of partner congregations, over 100, that work with us around advocacy. And they work directly on advocacy and working to build our supportive housing across the metro to kind of win the public will against NIMBY fights around that, and also to organize around public policy. And we've been moving more and more into that world of policy and organizing at the local and state level over the last 5 years. And part of that model is we have a community organizing model. So we have community organizers that work in those member congregations, organizing teams and engaging kind of a wide group of folks to be part of our whole mission, who share that out of their faith values. And so we're a part of a number of big housing campaigns. We're part of Homes for All, and to become more and more active in that. And we're also helping lead the Bring It Home Minnesota campaign, which many of you may have heard of, is our big push to really have universal housing rental assistance in the state of Minnesota and provided by the state of Minnesota. And so that is one of our big goals and what we're really working for as a transformational campaign. So why we started to work during the election season. So Beacon did not, prior to 2020, actually work, and we took the very cautious approach that Marie mentioned many nonprofits do, is they hear it like, we can't do anything. It's always risky to work in that space, and so we're not going to do that. And so usually Beacon kind of went quiet during that in their advocacy. And really in 2020, we really started changing our mood, talked with the board about that, and moved in a positive way of saying there's a lot of great things we can do in this. And so just like Libby was saying, right, housing is such an important issue and is often way down on the list of so many candidates and elected officials. And we really were noticing and that we could bring hundreds of people and really advocate and push elected officials, but unless you're really bringing it up during the time when the public are deciding and debating key priorities, which is during the election, issues often aren't elevated, right? Folks get a mandate once they're elected, and if they talked about these 5 issues and they got elected on that, that's what probably they're going to prioritize and work on. And housing was often never one of those. And so we really wanted to work in the election to elevate the issue. And we have found that it really builds a different relationship with the future public official. Whoever wins, they start to recognize your organization, recognize your advocacy, and are more willing to talk with you, engage with you. Even if they know you didn't endorse them, they know you're active and engaged with voters, which is a different way to think about your organization. And one way it feels like always is a better bridge to starting to engage whoever gets elected after they're elected. So the strategy we have adopted at Beacon, which works for our organization, and everyone has to kind of find what works best for those, is candidate forums. And because our first ones were in 2020, they looked like this on Zoom. This year, we're excited to have them in person and on Zoom. But we really adopted that strategy because for us as a congregational based kind of organizing arm of our organization, it made a lot of sense. Events is something we can do, and we have people in a lot of different areas. And so that's something that we thought we could really lean into and do that. And so we pioneered and did a number of them in 2020 around the Hennepin County commissioners and local state legislators, and they were very successful, I would say. And so the keys to the candidate forums we learned, and just to say a couple highlights of kind of how we've thought about them, is to really format the event and really be very clear with everyone. Our goal is to educate on issues and highlight community voices. And so we're not there, as everyone has said, to really impact the outcome of the election. We're there to educate folks on the issues. And so to structure the event to make sure we do that. And so we've always had it where we do some education during the events and then ask a question on there, but we're making sure that we're filling in voters and helping use the momentum created by the election that gets people to come into a room and talk about housing, to really educate them, to educate the candidates, and then to really hear from them about what they want. And so our kind of format and how we always do it in a way to not show favoritism to candidates is really use introductions to questions or the rest of the event to really highlight what we're doing and why we care so much about the issue and our values around it, but to really ask broad issues of candidates. So you can't set up a forum, right? We really care about rental assistance for all and our Bring It Home Minnesota campaign. We can't ask, are you for or against that? And then knowing that we're for it, that really leads everyone to see. It doesn't really pass the smell test or the mom test, as was said earlier, right? It looks like we are supporting one candidate over another if whoever says yes to that question, especially if we know one is going to say yes and one is going to say no to it. You can't ask that to show a clear differential and show a preference to one person. And so we can talk a little bit about why we support the issue, why we care about it so much, but then ask, what is your vision, to end housing instability in Minnesota, and really let them lead and open up the question. So that's how we get around trying to show that we're showing preference to one candidate or not, while still bringing up the things that are important to us. And I think people can have different interpretations of that, and that's that you got to just always work on nuancing that and making sure. And a lot of it depends on how hot the race is and how contentious that particular two candidates are to each other too. Key is we always treat both candidates the same. You got to do everything the same. Every email to one goes to the other. Everything happens kind of the same. But we've also found that some candidates love to come to these and some don't. And that we really work hard and use our constituents to truly get them there. That sometimes it's really easy to get one person there, but it's really important to have both candidates there to really show you're nonpartisan. So really to do a lot of work and sometimes really push them around, like, we're going to have all these people here, we really need you here. And that it often takes that to make sure that these issue-based forums that the candidates don't control, that they come to. And our kind of rule of thumb, now this is on timing, is just that it's better to hold them earlier in the election cycle than later. That the closer you get to the end, the more contentious things get, the more pressure builds up around things. And that, so we always kind of have as our rule of thumb in Beacon, let's try to hold our forums at least a month before, just because the closer and closer you get to elections, the harder it is to just kind of hold an educational neutral space that we want to hold at these events around who wins the election. And so I don't think that's just our way of doing it. I don't think there's a clear rule on that. And it's kind of up to your risk tolerance and determination what you do. Just to say a quick response around the ones we held in 2020 is right away, because we're working with congregations who are really timid about being involved in the election and being partisan, is there definitely was some hesitancy and need for explanation of why we're doing this, and to be really clear on our goals, always upfront of what we're doing and why we're doing this, and to really stick to being nonpartisan and clear. And that overall, because we did that, people really enjoyed issue-based work to focus on the election, and really enjoyed that way of engaging versus kind of the normal noise of an election. And our supporters and congregations have been positive and really excited for us to engage more, which has led to us to continue to work this year to do a number of forums as well. And so we're again engaging in some legislative candidate forums So how we kind of choose where to do these is where our congregations are, and then also where there's an election that actually has kind of two viable candidates that are kind of polling somewhere above, like it's not just a clear one's winning and one's not. And we don't do that to try to disrupt or be a part of it, more so that's part of our goal is that we want people to be interested in what we're doing, and that if there really isn't kind of a race to be had, folks aren't going to come to a forum. It's hard to get the candidates there. It just doesn't really have the same flavor as when they know they're really trying to learn about the candidates, learn who's thinking what way about what thing. And so this year we're holding one in Shakopee, and we're focusing on Senate candidate and then one House race there, right around the city of Shakopee. And our local congregations there are hosting it and are working on doing that. And then our other one in the metro is in Plymouth area, our Senate and two House races there where congregations are hosting and engaging around those. And these can be found if you go to Beacon's website in our events, you can see when those are. It's September 29th and October 6th is the dates. The other big thing we are engaged in and putting a lot of our effort toward this year is working on a gubernatorial forum called A Vision for Home. And so we really think and agree right to the bigger thing of really needing to elevate the issue of housing, especially to the level of governor, and really wanting that discussion to be had amongst our candidates for governor. And there's no better way to really elevate the discussion than to move it to kind of the biggest race in the state right now. And so we knew that we as Beacon couldn't pull this off on our own, and that it would be much better. So many of you maybe have already partnered. And if you haven't partnered and want to be a part of this, please email me and connect. We're happy to really bring on any partners. We're doing a number of organizing meetings to kind of plan the event and to plan the questions that are asked, kind of following all the things I just named in the guidelines. But we're really excited about this. It's going to be held at Wayzata Community Church. And then I'll also throw in the chat in just a bit here the registration if you want to come to this. And so we're working hard to kind of really put on a big event around housing. We're also working hard to get the candidates there, which is always some effort to get them to see the importance of this and why. But right now we have a lot of groups a part of it, and we're really excited about it. And then another new thing we're doing this year is some organizing in greater Minnesota work and kind of pioneering a different style. So the first forums we talked about are in our partner congregations, and we're leading and doing them. The second one is we're a partner with a bunch of housing organizations and everyone we've worked with a lot before. In this model, we're really reaching out to engage candidates outside our region of work. And we're kind of trying to pilot a new model where we pick some key communities that we want to build more partnerships in and work in. And so we picked 4 communities kind of outside the metro. And there we're trying to find a group of organizations where we provide them resources, template questions, and help them kind of pull together a little forum that they lead and customize to them, and that we give them some kind of broad questions and tell them kind of about the big housing issues like Bring It Home and others that they could be lifting up. Let them lift up their own questions and really help sponsor and put that on, but really have them lead and move. And the goals of this is to build new relationships with organizations outside the metro, and secondly, to really make sure housing in a broad way and that conversation is being lifted up in a lot of different areas of the state and not just the metro. And so this is a new endeavor of ours, and kind of we're just working on this this year to see how it goes and if we want to continue it in the future. So that is our work around forums and kind of everything we're doing, and happy to answer any questions on that.
Thanks, Ben. So we do have a few minutes if anyone has any questions for me, Brian, or Ben. Again, you can put them in the chat or raise your hands or just speak out. Brian, if you could just unmute folks. So Ben, I did have a question for you, because you mentioned something about, so you work really hard to get both candidates to an event for a forum, but sometimes only one shows up. And we've talked about it with the gubernatorial forum, like what happens if only one says yes. Can you talk about how you have to adjust your event? And some of the unique considerations that you have when only one candidate will show up.
Yeah, I mean, that's always less than ideal. And so always working to get both there is good, and trying to get in some dialogue with candidates. I'd say it's always hard because, right, you eventually have to set a date and a time and a place way before they want to commit. And so and then they're always like, wow, I got stuff happening that day, or things don't work. So really trying to figure out how to accommodate and how to get them there. Are you okay with them sending a surrogate? Are there ways to like bring in, I've done it ones where one person's there, but there's a little video message from the other. So are there ways that like you make sure to demonstrate to the audience you're nonpartisan and you're not just like throwing a campaign event for one person? And so I found the key ways of doing that. Make sure you say over and over again, we've invited both candidates, show some indication of that even in the room or how you're talking about it. If they don't end up sending a surrogate or not engaging at all in the event, I just still recommend, and I think it's not a bad idea to still hold the event, and to have the one person there, but just really emphasize and demonstrate in every way that you really wanted, say over and over again how much you wanted X candidate to be there and how important it was, and that you did all you could to get them there, and really talk about that with everyone of all the different steps you took. But that still ask the candidate who does want to participate to show up and engage and do your program as you would.
So there's a question on the chat for you, Ben, about are there particular denominations that have been more supportive than others, and other key positions to engage in congregations that take a lead in housing advocacy?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we've had a lot of success with lots of different denominations, and Beacon's made a lot of congregations of different types. I'd say, I mean, I think the ELCA Lutheran Synod is, of course, super supportive always, and more progressive on housing issues. UCC churches often are, but really kind of runs the whole spectrum of what denominations are. And I know we have several Catholic churches that are becoming more engaged now on housing. So wide open on that. And then, are there key positions to engage congregations? I think you're talking about people in the congregation as positions or housing issues. So I'll say in terms of people to engage, it really matters usually kind of the strategy of who are the decision makers in the church and how do you go after them. Often the pastor is a lot of that, but in a lot of congregations, stuff like this, they have to, so some places like a Catholic church, the priest is the one who can make the decision or move forward and kind of make it happen. Maybe in a Lutheran church or UCC or some others, it would be, they have to bring it to the church council to get their blessing. But usually the pastor or someone is kind of the strong or social justice person on the staff or a key person is the one to bring it to. And so I advise usually starting, and what we usually do is either starting with an advocate who we know already part of that congregation who's willing to help us, and then eventually talk to the pastor or right to the pastor themselves.
Well, thank you so much, Ben, and thank you, everyone. So we will follow up with you, send out slides from this this webinar, as well as a link to the recording. Here are some additional resources that you'll get as we send this information out. And thank you so much again for joining us this morning. If you have any questions or you want to engage further in MHP's work around the candidate questionnaire, feel free to email me. And I think Ben would feel the same about Beacon's work and their forums. And I know that partners from Habitat are on the call and they're eager to engage, and Habitat also has additional resources on their website. So again, thank you so much for joining us this morning and have a good rest of your day.